Hey everyone, this is Blake at Firing Line Shooting. Today we're going to be talking about a couple of different guns and kind of comparing them. The wind is pretty strong today, so excuse me if the camera blows over or if you hear it on the mic. The first gun that we have here is the Marlin CSBL. I did the handguard swap on this one. I believe it's Midwest Industries that makes that M-LOK handguard. And then I've also got a Tourbon stock cover with some little ammo carriers here. Otherwise, it's just a stock Marlin CSBL. This is chambered in 357 Magnum. The ammo I brought today is 38 Special, just to kind of keep it tame, because I don't really have a ton of experience shooting these kind of guns. I've also got the MRO on here. I know some people have different perspectives about the MRO, but to me it's been a solid optic, and not shooting at 100 plus yards, I don't think it's really a problem, so this should be good for just our video purposes today. The other gun that we have here is going to be a completely stock, the new Smith & Wesson 1854 Stealth Hunter gun. It comes with a handguard like this, nice tapered M-LOK handguard here, which I do like the way that feels a lot. And on this one, I've got the Holosun 510C green dot. I'm just kind of doing the review today to see what the first impressions are like, and specifically compared with the Marlin CSBL to see how that works. The ammo that we're going to be using is some pretty standard PMC bronze 38 special ammo, and that's going to be across the board. And then we'll also shoot a little bit suppressed just to see how that goes. This is a silencer code Omega 36M. This is going to be a 36 caliber suppressor. It can be in the longer configuration, but I have this one in the shorter configuration because I also use it with pistols. I've used some stakes and some weights on this target here, and it keeps giving me problems, but we're going to do our best to make it work. Again, here are those two guns side by side, the Marlin 1894 CSBL and the Smith & Wesson Stealth Hunter 1854. I'm also going to do a quick conversation about the Savior ear protection. I haven't tried using this before, but the new Savior ear protection should be nice. It's got the little name tag or whatever you want to use it for on the side. And this one also comes standard with gel inserts. I typically have used Walker, but for a couple extra nice features and about the same price, if not cheaper, the Savior stuff seems to be a pretty nice buy. Looking at some of the Savior compared to some of the Walkers that I have, the Savior's still going to have those same, not omnidirectional, but one directional microphones that kind of go on the front is usually where you have that aimed, same kind of volume control as the Walkers do, a little bit more comfortable gel inserts. Here's how a comparable pair of Walkers would look. Same thing with the microphones on one side, which you can kind of see there and there. These ones are going to come standard with just like a foam ear muff. And then these are the Patriot series. These are the ones that I use most often. You've got a couple of patches there as well. And then I have the gel inserts added on. You can buy these for like maybe 20 bucks, maybe a little bit cheaper than that. But I always run them with the gel. So they're going to be a closer comparison with this set, which is usually $10 to $20 more. So $50 to $60 range. And I think these have been found at $40. These do take 2 AAA batteries, just like the Walkers do, and the similar type of slide-up cover. So if you're worried about the battery type being different, they are going to be the same and even load the same way. One thing that's kind of cool about the Saviors is they do have like a left and right marking inside, which lines up with where the microphone is, because you want that microphone to be in the front 99% of the time, unless maybe you're taking a class. Then you might want to turn them backwards or something. But for the most part, that left and right is going to be accurate for you to be wearing these. The Walkers don't actually have that, but if you're used to wearing them, it's not really that big of a deal. All right, now that I've got these Savior headphones on, I do notice a lot of noise cancellation. They do feel very comfortable. Hearing my own voice, I feel like isn't quite as loud as some of the other ones I've tried. There is a nice audible beep when you turn them on, so you can see kind of like what the volume is and also indicating that they are on. Now that I've got them on a little bit louder, I can hear my voice a little bit better, and the ambient sounds in nature and everything, the birds tweeting and stuff, I can hear that stuff really good. And I really don't have a lot of wind noise, which I feel like maybe they're a little bit more with the Walkers, but it's pretty comparable. The gel inserts are very comfortable. I should note that I'm not sponsored by Savior or anything. I'm just reviewing these noise canceling headphones, ear protection, earmuffs, whatever you want to call them, as part of my review here to kind of get a comparison and see if it's something that I would want to continue buying. Also, Smith & Wesson and Marlin are not sponsoring the video. The Marlin is my gun that I've recently done the handguard swap on, and I have yet to shoot it, but I am planning on keeping it. And then the Smith & Wesson Stealth Hunter is one that I purchased. I'm a FFL, so I did get it at dealer cost, but I will be selling the gun afterwards. So I strictly just wanted to get the knowledge on how they kind of compared for my own understanding and to share with you guys. All right, I have been going just about out of my mind picking up this target stand over and over again because it is so windy. But we're going to go ahead and start loading a few of these 38 special rounds in here. Cool. I have yet to zero these guns, so that's the first thing that I'll be doing. All right, I've got my first 5 rounds loaded in here. I'm going to see where my first hits are so I can get this thing zeroed and also get a good first impression for how it shoots. I'm going for the center of this black and red target at the bottom. One thing is a safety was just off, so I do have to put that safety in. It is a barrel kind of safety through the receiver. All right, that was pretty good. It looks like we're a little bit high and right, maybe 2 inches. The recoil impulse was almost nothing, so 357 would probably fit great through here without any issues. The Marlin functions really smoothly. All right, that's a little bit better. I'm pretty much in the area that I need to be in, and I think I'm out of ammo now. Yep. So it doesn't fly out like it would like a pistol or a semi-automatic rifle or anything. If you want it to fly out, you really have to kick that thing hard. Something I'm not really used to, not having a ton of experience with lever guns, but the action is super, super smooth. So I'll go ahead and load up some in the 1854 as well. I've got 5 rounds loaded in the 1854 as well. This one has that same drum safety going through the receiver, so we've got that one on fire. I'm going to go ahead and start off going for that center one again and see if I can see where I'm impacting. Again, these haven't been zeroed at all, so I need to get that first zero. The Marlin action does feel a hair smoother. This one kind of has almost a little bit of a click when it gets to the open portion, and then a small click when it gets back to the closed portion, whereas the Marlin just kind of slides nicely all the way through. Not a big deal, especially if you're going quickly, but just something I can get a first impression on. All right, it looks like that one was dead center, but a little bit low, so I'm going to come up a little bit and then switch to one of these other red targets. Let's see how the ejection is here. About the same. You could kind of see that that stutter on the way back in with the lever. There is a little bit of a click. Now I'm going for the bottom right. Still a little bit low. The impulse feels a little bit different here. I would say there's a little bit less recoil with the Marlin that I can kind of notice off the bat. The trigger, even though this is a flat trigger compared to the Marlin's round trigger, I do feel like this one took a little bit more effort to pull back. Now we're hot, safety off. All right, that one's really right there touching the red now. Again, the triggers are very predictable. There's a nice wall and you know when it's gonna go. I think that the angle is maybe a tiny bit different. Yeah. Let's put this on safety and show you guys what I'm talking about. All right, so what I was just talking about is there's a slightly different angle of the grip. So you can see these things are perfectly lined up here. And then when we get to the Marlin stock protrudes a little bit out further down than this one does. And I actually like the way that the Marlin kind of comes down into almost more of a pistol grip angle. I know it looks subtle here, but I did feel like my hand was more turned forward this way with the 1854, which didn't feel quite as nice as the Marlin, which was a little bit more like this. Just that gentle curve, that subtleness does make a tiny bit difference. All right, these are about good enough for me. That thing's nice and clear now. Now, I really did not come into this with any kind of biases, but I want to point out a couple of things that I'm noticing. Again, I talked about that grip angle being just a tiny bit better with the Marlin. Also, and we're clear here, when I'm going to push out and get that nice like C-clamp grip that I'm used to, I like the way that this little nub kind of comes between my fingers, and then it's right there where I need to be. You'll notice I have a riser on here because I set my optic up a little bit higher. That way I can still see my iron sights down here through this mount. But when I have my hand out there at a comfortable spot, it actually just feels really nice. I still have all this grip I can use in front of me. Whereas with this one, I really thought I was going to like this tapered part of the handguard and that it would fit perfectly with what I need. But when I go to push out, my C-clamp grip really wants to be like up here. So I'm off the handguard now, which isn't exactly what I would want. If I come in a little bit, yeah, the handguard feels nice, but my arm feels awkward because I'm used to shooting out a little bit further like this. So not to say that somebody couldn't get used to that, but considering you want the handguard to be there for your hand, having it a little bit out in front isn't exactly what I would call ideal. Now to talk a little bit about the lever action and the way it kind of hangs up like I mentioned, we are clear in this one as well. So when you slowly work this action, it comes out and there's a little bit of a sticking before it comes. And then right here, there's some resistance and then it finishes coming. And when you go to pull it back in, right there is about where it stops. And then you have to kind of squeeze it into place. Whereas with the Marlin, it easily unlocks. There's a little bit of a resistance there. But then when you get up front, it just slides into where it needs to. And then when you go to pull back, there's almost no stopping it right there. It just smoothly slides right into where it needs to be. So there's a lot more noticeable click from here to here with the Smith & Wesson. Like, it takes a lot more effort to get it driven home there, and you can probably hear a difference in the way that click sounds. So let's try and get them close to the mic here and hear the clicks. So I'm trying to release it, take some effort, click right there, click right there. Trying to do the same thing here. A lot easier to unlock. Not really a click there. And then no click right there. I mean, you can hear there's almost nothing there. So when you're working this gun and you're holding it out and you're working it fast, you're probably not going to notice it as much. Yeah, it feels really about the same. So working it fast isn't going to be an issue. It's just if you're not really familiar with them and you're trying to slowly go through the motions to like figure things out, it's not quite as smooth as the action on the Marlin. That's something to point out. I do want to load both of these and go through the firing sequence. So if you guys have any tips for how to load these a better way, please let me know, because I certainly struggle with this. on. Looks like I keep going too far in and it gets kind of stuck in there. All right, so that one's loaded with 5. This is something that I'm gonna have to practice quite a bit to get good at. I do feel like this one loads a little bit smoother. Maybe there's not as much room for air for it to get stuck. All right, now I just want to hit some steel a little bit, go through the motions pretty fast, at least fast for me using a lever gun, which I'm not really accustomed to using, and see if everything functions smoothly going through 5 rounds kind of fast. Now with the Marlin, all right, in working that action, like I kind of talked about, it did feel a lot more slow and clunky, loading and shooting that Smith & Wesson 1854. So going back into the trigger, I almost had to look for it on each shot, whereas with the Marlin, as soon as I came back, the trigger was right there where I needed it to be. I'm trying to hide the mic so it's not getting all windy, but the trigger felt like it was right where it needed to be. The grip angle and everything, it just felt nicer to me. So it's really difficult to review these guns with a little bit of experience I have shooting lever guns, and also with how sexy these guns are naturally. So you can just look at both of these guns together. Neither one of these things looks bad. You don't want to say anything bad about either one of these guns. They're both fantastic looking. This one's a little bit more tactical and cool looking, maybe a little bit more stealthy like the name suggests. This one's a little bit more flashy, but that handguard kind of makes it look a little bit more tactical too. But it's hard for me to not just say everything is better about the Marlin. I had an easier time loading the 1854 than I did the Marlin, but as far as working the action, shooting and everything, the Marlin just seems more intuitive. I look forward to kind of putting some more thoughts together about it as I continue shooting. I'm going to shoot about 100 rounds through each one, and then later on I'll get a trigger pull gauge on here and we can see how the trigger feels, or what the difference in the trigger weight is on these two puppies. All right, we'll just do a fast cycle through both of these guns from the side view. I'm definitely getting red in between these knuckles here. One thing that I can say is because of the smoothness of the Marlin, every time I go to kick that lever out, it's not really hurting me too much. But because I encounter that resistance right here, so right there and right there, my fingers are getting a little bit more beat up by this gun right here. It's a kind of violent impact right there at the front. Whereas with this gun, it slows down enough where it doesn't feel as violent. So it's just a little bit slower and smoother through the action. There's more continuous resistance instead of like a harsh stop towards the end, if that makes sense. These rifles are both going to be an 8 capacity. One thing you'll see is that there is a rubber O-ring on this thread protector. What that's going to do is when you get this nice and tight to the bottom, you start feeling some resistance. That way when you turn that thread protector, it is going to be nice and secure and not want to come off. It takes some effort to actually slide that thing off. And I'm going to go ahead and leave this off so we can put a suppressor on there, but everything looks nice and clean there. O-ring holds everything in place. Very good. When I go to do the same thing with this one, you can see that there's no O-ring in there, and I've got a lot of this, like almost like a thread locker, it looks like. That's kind of, it's got gunked up in here as well. And without that O-ring, I mean, you spin and you spin until you're at the bottom, but then there's just no resistance to get this thing off. So one thing to keep in mind is that if you're using this gun, you will need to add an O-ring or something to keep that in place. Otherwise, I might be worried about losing that thread protector. All right, now we're going to go ahead and try shooting these with a can. This is again the Silencer Co. Omega 36M. I use it for 9mm and I use it on my ARs. Again, like I mentioned before, loading this gun has been kind of a pain. For some reason, all my rounds just want to cant inward, and I wish that there was something to kind of stop that from happening. It's like I have to put a bunch of force on the back end to make sure it feeds in straight, otherwise it won't feed in the right way. I have had a much easier time loading the Smith & Wesson 1854. Loading probably wouldn't be a deal breaker considering everything else seems to be better about this gun than that gun. But maybe there's a fix that I don't know about. If you know something I don't, please put it in the comments so we can answer that. But here we go. Let's shoot this thing suppressed. Oh, yeah. Very quiet. This thing is nice when it's suppressed. Ooh. You know, I'm glad that I did this because I'm finding out that there's a difference here. The Marlin is going to have the 1/2 by 28 threads, I think it is. And this one's going to have the 5/8 by 54 threads. Man, I might be mixing that all up because it's been a while since I looked at the thread counts. But yeah, the suppressor is not going to fit on there. This is like the 9mm standard for 223 size, the 1/2 width size, and it doesn't fit on here. So that tells me that this is going to be like a 5/8 threading, like an AR-10 or something along those lines would be. It is good to know that that is not compatible with the 9mm 1/2 by 24 suppressor. I might be mixing that all up, but regardless of what those exact measurements are, the thread pitches on these are going to be different. The size is going to be different. So that suppressor would not be compatible with this gun. Depending on what kind of suppressor you have, that may or may not be a big deal. That may be a good thing because you only have a suppressor that's this size. You could also fix that by adding like a muzzle device or something. I could put a muzzle device on both of these guns that would adapt to those threads. That I could put my other Silencer Co. Omega on with a quick detach thing. I currently have the dead air chemo mounts on all of my guns, so I could add something similar to these guns if I wanted to, just to make it a super quick on and off with the other suppressor that I have and keep this one with my pistols. But now at least we know that the 38 suppressed is super, super quiet, and that the thread pitches are different, which I didn't know before. So I hope that helps. All right, I've got these guns loaded back up again, and the next thing I want to do is shoot a slow motion video where you can see kind of how the recoil and everything looks when we do shoot through these guns. I've got both of them loaded with 8 rounds, so on this next video, you'll see how they look in slow motion. Here we go. sure you noticed in that slow motion video, the Smith & Wesson did have a failure to feed on one. It was partially going in, but it wasn't going all the way. At first, I was concerned about a squib, but then when I ejected this round and tried to chamber the next round, it went in smoothly, so I wasn't really worried about that. This round doesn't look particularly bad or anything. It looks pretty straight. Doesn't really look like there's anything wrong with it. If you saw something that I didn't see from behind the gun, let me know and maybe we can find a logical explanation for that. But so far, that's the first malfunction that we've had so far. I will stop real quick and say that these Savior ear protection are working out really good. I have sunglasses on and I don't have a headache yet. I've been out here for a little bit. So I guess the gel inserts are doing their job. It barely feels like I'm wearing hearing protection. Nothing feels uncomfortable or anything, and they definitely are keeping the sound quiet. I am hearing a ton of wind noise, but it's a very windy day today. I don't think I would be having better luck necessarily with the walkers. I think something like that's just kind of unavoidable unless you have a nice little fluff or something that's on those earbuds. And I did go ahead and put that round in the Marlin to see if it fires fine through here. No issues. All right, now just for fun, we're going to go ahead and pick off a few different targets since we know that we're good and zeroed. And empty. Empty. All right, now we're going to go ahead and demonstrate loading both of these guns because I think you'll be able to see what I mean when I'm talking about having issues loading the Marlin versus loading the Smith & Wesson. So first, let's load the Smith & Wesson and see how that looks. All right, not too bad. Now let's go ahead and load the Marlin. See, like that is where it gets stuck in there. You have to find the hole. I don't love that. Same thing. Same thing. All right, I get it that I am an amateur with lever guns, but I think it says something how easy that is to load and why this one isn't going directly in the hole like it's supposed to. Tell me what you think about that in the comments. Looks like I'm having microphone issues. Looks like the device that connects to my phone might not be working properly now, probably because my phone took a spill. So we'll just finish off this video with some shooting, just some fun shooting between the two guns, and we'll kind of wrap up with the final thoughts after this. Look forward to seeing what you guys think. Hey you guys, I just wanted to come in and do the wrap up here on these guns. One thing I said I was going to do was do a trigger pull gauge on these things. So I've got the Lyman trigger pull gauge here. All these guns are clear. You can see that again there. So let's go ahead and see what we get. Okay. All right, we get 4 pounds, 13.7 ounces. So that's the first pull. Let's see what we get on the next one. 4 pounds, 8 ounces. And we'll go ahead and do one more. 4 pounds, 4.6 ounces. So it looks like we're going to be right at about the 4.5 pound mark on this Marlin. And then same thing here. This one is clear. You can see that. So we'll go ahead and put the trigger pull gauge on this one as well. This one did have a flat trigger. This one was 3 pounds, 9 ounces. But that's doing it at the lower portion of that flat trigger, which could make a difference for sure. 3 pounds, 9.6 ounces. You notice it's very interesting because essentially it's saying that the Marlin is 4.5 pounds and that the Smith & Wesson is 3.5 pounds. But I gotta say, the feeling doesn't really feel like that. Maybe it's because I'm going up on the top portion of the trigger. I think that's what the difference is. The top portion of the trigger feeling a lot different than the bottom portion of the trigger. Okay. So let's go ahead and pull it from the middle portion of the trigger where your finger would actually kind of be resting. That's about 4 pounds. That's almost 5 pounds, 4 pounds, 13 ounces. That one's over 5 pounds. And that's about 4 pounds. So we already know this, but of course, the lower that you can go on that trigger, the easier that trigger pull is going to feel. The higher up you are, the more it's going to feel. My finger kind of goes to a higher portion of that trigger. So that's why this one feels a little bit more stiff for me, I think, probably over 5 pounds, because my finger naturally sits higher. When your grip is right here, you're almost pulling up to the top portion of that trigger versus on like a pistol gripped gun where you might have your finger down a lot lower. This just doesn't feel natural, in my opinion. Natural would be middle to very upper portion of the trigger. And with that being said, this one feels a little bit heavier when you're on that portion of the trigger versus the Marlin, where your finger really is in that same spot, the upper to mid portion of the trigger. But that break just feels a little bit cleaner for some reason. Maybe it's the shape of the trigger, maybe it's something else going on in there. But the Marlin does feel nicer and more crisp of a break, unless you were to change the angle of your hand some and be using the lower portion of that trigger, then you would have a little bit of an easier time squeezing. Some of the other final thoughts that I had about the guns, the only spot that I could find an advantage with the Smith & Wesson, as far as the mechanics go, was loading it. As a beginner in lever action guns, I had an easy time loading the Smith & Wesson gun, and I had a rather difficult time loading the Marlin. I don't know why that is. Hopefully somebody can fill me in more, but I did like that about it. However, pretty much everything else about the Marlin gave the edge to it, in my opinion. I loved the way the handguard is and where your hand sits on there versus losing some handguard here, even though the aesthetics of the tapered handguard looks really nice on the Smith & Wesson. I like the action so much more on the Marlin versus the Smith & Wesson. The dark color is beautiful on the Smith & Wesson, but I'm also a big fan of the black laminate wood look of the Marlin. So they both are very aesthetically pleasing. It just kind of depends on which one you think looks better. But I really do think that for the average enjoyer, the Marlin is going to feel better when you go to work the action and things like that. I did mention that I was looking to keep my Marlin and probably sell the Smith & Wesson after reviewing, but that wasn't entirely true. Part of the reason I got the Smith & Wesson was because I thought it looked amazing, and I was wondering if I should regret buying the Marlin. Part of the intent of the review was to see if I liked the Smith & Wesson lever action better, and if I did, then I would have sold the Marlin. So I understand that me saying that I'm buying this gun to review it and sell it could seem like it's a little bit of a bias thing, but it really wasn't that way. I was actually really expecting a lot out of this gun, and I like the way it looks so much that I would have loved for that gun to just blow me away in every way, and for me to keep that one instead and sell the Marlin, because out of the box, this one already looks as good as this one does, and I've had to buy the handguard and change it out and things like that. So I would have loved for the Smith & Wesson to kind of win this challenge or be at least equally comparable, but in my opinion, it didn't go that way. So I wanted to eliminate the idea that there could be a bias there with me planning on just selling this gun versus keeping this one, because I did really intend to see which one I liked better and keep which one I liked better. And so far, that seems to be the Marlin. And to finish the video off, I did only have that one malfunction that we encountered on the range. We talked about that one a little bit. It was kind of a failure to feed. I don't know what was causing the blockage for it not to go in there appropriately in the Smith & Wesson. That round did go through the Marlin fine, and maybe if I would have loaded it back in the Smith & Wesson, it would have gone through fine again. Again, I don't really know what the issue was, but that was the only issue we encountered in about 100 rounds through each gun. So it could have been a fluke. Maybe it was just something weird that happened and caused that malfunction. Not to say that the Smith & Wesson is less reliable than the Marlin. However, between those 100 rounds fired through each gun, we did only have that one malfunction, and it was with the Smith & Wesson. So take that with a grain of salt and think of it what you will. And that pretty much concludes this video. So I do really enjoy doing these videos. At this point, I'm not monetized. I'm spending my own money getting this content in for you guys and for myself as well. So if you'd like to see me grow and maybe be able to have some freebies come in or something where I can do more reviews of kind of more new and upcoming content, I would really like for you to like the video, share it with your friends, comment down below so that I can get some engagement with you guys, and subscribe to the channel so you can see some new things. The next video on my radar is going to be to compare the Radian Ramjet and Afterburner with the Safiri Precision version of the same thing. And these are going to be tested with the SIG P365. I did do a small test of the Safiri Precision one already, and that's on my channel. But I wanted to specifically shoot two P365s and compare the Radian and the Safiri Precision one side by side. So stand by for that one. Subscribe if you haven't. And thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. I'm Blake, and this is how you load a lever gun.